Tonight, we are kind of at the end of this chapter. And it's kind of interesting because this is a night we do every single year. You know, I know that it's coming. You know that it's coming. Even when we get back to school in August, seniors for that year, for incoming seniors know that this day is coming. And while we are excited about racing toward the finish line of graduation, we're not exactly excited about this night, because this night is kind of the end of an era. And so one of the things that we try to do on this night is to prepare and prayerfully send forth our seniors into a mission field. I, every year, have to come up with a different sermon for this, which is not easy. And this year is especially difficult because this is the first senior class that I had when they were freshmen. And so the memories, for me, go deep. And so as I was thinking, I've written this sermon about 17 times over the last few weeks. Even David, Sunday night, said, "So what is really the thrust of your sermon on Tuesday?" And I said, "I have no idea. I'm just praying it over." And as I really got to thinking and praying more and more, a lot of the different pieces started coming together. And I want to ask you this question because I think that it goes for everybody. Have you ever had one of those nights, maybe it's a late night out, where you just go stand outside and you look up and you just see the stars? And you think about the biggest questions in your life. Maybe those are questions of what is my purpose? Maybe it's questions of what really is God when we get down to it? When I was in college, I took astronomy because I'm awful at every science. So I decided to go the easy route, and it wasn't at all physics and chemistry and biology on a universal level, taught by someone who specialized in one of Jupiter's moons. It was very difficult. But our labs were always outside. We would drive for a while and we'd go to Horse Pens 40. So those of you that spend hours and hours in your labs, in lab coats and goggles, just know that we had campouts looking at the stars and we did math, but that's not what I remember. As I looked at these stars, I just constantly thought to myself, man, this is incredible. And I'm just laying there we brought blankets and picnic baskets. It was a very serious lab. And we would look at the stars, and I just was thinking to myself, God, look at all the things that you have created. Look at all of the things. And do you know what it did? It made me think how big God is, but it also did this. It made me realize how small we are, how insignificant we are. So that the psalmist is right when he says, "What is human that you are mindful of them? Who are we that you are mindful of us, God?" And that was the question that I had. Who are we? What are we even doing here? We all want significance. But in the vast scheme of things, we're pretty insignificant. We look up in the night sky and we think about all of life's biggest questions. And sometimes those questions are answered and sometimes they're not. Have you ever looked up in the sky and said, God, what am I here for? Why did you make me? When he was 75 years old, Abram, soon to be known as Abraham, had that question. And he was standing out in the night sky and he was saying, God, what is the point of it all? Because when you're about 75 years old, you start to wonder, when I'm gone, what's going to be left? Abraham didn't have a legacy. He didn't have any children or anything like that at 75 years old, and he thought that ship had sailed, and he was pretty bummed out about it. Have I done anything of value while I was on this earth? Have I done anything that really mattered? As he looks up at the sky, stars in the sky, he said, has there been anything that's been worth it? And in Genesis 15, God speaks to him. The word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your what? Shield. Your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? Don't worry about his story. It just goes to somebody else, right? And Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him, This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. And he took him outside and said, Look up at the sky. Count the stars, if indeed you can count them. And then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Now, can you imagine that? Abram is looking up at the star. It's a deep night, and he's just in this sad state of mind. He says, God, is there anything more for me? There's no legacy. My legacy ends here. And my bet is that for some of you seniors, you are asking that about your life. Has my time here in college meant anything? Yeah, I've gotten grades. Yeah, I've gotten marks. Yeah, I may have a job. I may not have a job. I may have a future. I may be uncertain about my future. God, you've got my future. But in my time here at the University of Alabama, has there been anything that truly mattered? Everybody graduates with a major. Not everyone graduates with a meaning. And have you graduated with a meaning? This is a question that you ask. And if you're a junior, a sophomore, or a freshman, you may be asking that question as well. If you're a freshman, you might be saying, I got plenty of time to figure that out. But I'll tell you, you can ask any of these seniors. It goes by like that. Are you graduating with a major or a major and a meaning? Abraham said, What does it all mean? And God said, there will be a legacy for you. And it will be a son. And not just that, look at the night sky. That's how many descendants you will have. That will be your legacy. True to form, God kept his promise, and Abram and his wife Sarah, 25 years later, by the way, had their son, Isaac. Isaac must have been the spitting image of his father, Abraham. And you can imagine that Abraham cherished him until one day, God said to Abraham, I want you to sacrifice your son. Now, there's a lot of connotations with the Babylonian culture and the Middle Eastern culture at this time. All these gods, the surrounding gods, were demanding child sacrifice. Do you love your God enough to do this? And God is standing up to that and says, sacrifice your son for me. And you know the story, perhaps. If you don't know, the way that it goes is Abraham goes and is obedient to the Lord and brings little Isaac with him, and then binds Isaac and lifts up a knife, and just as he is about to sacrifice his son, an angel of the Lord says, stop. Which is great for the story, but if you are Isaac, that's terrifying. In Genesis 31, we get to hear a lot of the characters in the Old Testament, a lot of the strong biblical patriarchs or biblical legends of the Old Testament had what I would like to call pet names for God. And so I highlighted one, the shield of Abraham. Theologians refer to this as the shield of Abraham, the protector of the legacy. Well, Isaac had this one. In chapter 31, 42, if the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac. Now you can imagine why Isaac referred to God as the fear, right? Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this one out. If the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, Jacob, Isaac's son, is talking, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you. Again, Jacob says, may the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, who's somebody else, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. Now you say, why am I talking about this? Because Jacob inherited the lineage of the God of his fathers. He inherited the fear of Isaac as well as the shield of Abraham. And then he lived his own story. And it was on another night when Jacob, the son of Isaac, the grandson of Abraham, is laying down looking up at the stars. He and his brother were horribly estranged. It's a long story, but Jacob swindled his brother out of the blessing and the estate and the whole deal. It was a drama moment. But Jacob is about to be in front of Esau, his brother, for the first time in a very long time, and he is very upset about it. But God proves to be a God of reconciliation, and God proves to be a God that will overpower our will. And as Jacob is looking up at the stars, it says that Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. And we understand that that man is an angel of the Lord. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. And then the man said, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And the man asked him, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. And then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. That night, Jacob, laying there, looking at the stars, wondering how his life got to the point that it was, had this inner turmoil that turned into a physical turmoil with God. Have you ever struggled with God? Have you ever contended with God? It's one of those moments where God's like got your arm. It's like, okay, you're twisting my arm. Okay, I'll reconcile with this person. Thank you, God. Okay, it's one of those moments where God rebukes your conscience to the point that you can't do anything but obey. And this is known as the strength of Jacob. God is personified as the strength of Jacob. And here we have these three beautiful metaphors for who God is in this wild family: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And Jacob had many sons, and ultimately Jacob had a son named Joseph. And Joseph, through his amazing story, led the entire family of Jacob/Israel into Egypt. And then many years later, there came a Pharaoh that did not know Joseph or the entire story, and he enslaved the people, right? He enslaved all the Israelites, and that's when God proved himself to be the deliverer. But I want to point out what God says to Moses as he's about to deliver the Israelites from Egypt. God said, I am the God of your father, and the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. You see, some people thought that there were a lot of different family gods, like there was the God of Abraham over here, and then there was the God of Isaac over here, and then there was the God of Jacob over here. But God definitively declares that I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm all of them. I am the shield, I am the fear, I am the strength, and I am with you. And that was a turning point for the nation of Israel. And it's one that started with the promise to Abraham. It started under a night sky when Abraham asked, what am I here for? So I ask you tonight, what are you here for? What is your legacy beyond this year? Those of you that are graduating, you have left quite a legacy. As I think through the list of names that we have and the stories associated with each one of these names, there is a void that is not going to easily be filled. Because each one of you, in some ways, has contributed to God's kingdom here. Each one of you, in some ways, has looked up in the stars and said, what am I here for? And here at Wesley, you've started to discover your purpose, what you were here for. You found at Wesley a family, a home, a place that accepted you, a place that welcomed you, a place that taught you about yourself, and most importantly, about Jesus and what Jesus says about you. You found a place of mission. And over these 4 years, or however long you've been here, some of you started your senior year, your junior year, sophomore, or whatever. Over your time here at Wesley, my prayer is that you've had some of those questions answered. You know, we spend a lot of time thinking about the future. We think a lot about what it is that we're supposed to be here for. And we've talked a lot about the stars tonight, but I want to remind you of one particular night when people were looking up at the stars. And it actually takes place in the New Testament. And I think it's such a beautiful image of what you and I are created to do and be. And there were these wise astrologers from the east. And they went on their way and they were following the star, because astrologers look at the stars, and they were following a star. And they saw that it rose ahead of them, and they followed it until it stopped over a place where the child was, where Jesus was. You may have heard this story around Christmas. These astrologers traveled all the way from the east, following this star that was a little out of place. And they followed it until they got to where Jesus was. And when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. The Bible talks about you and me as being the light of the world. Now, it also talks about Jesus as the light of the world, which is kind of confusing, because if Jesus is the light of the world, then we're not the light of the world, so which one is it? Well, the Bible is contradictory. Let's throw the whole thing out, right? No, not exactly. The Bible says that Jesus is the light of the world, but the truth of it all is that if Jesus lives in you, then you are also the light of the world, because the light of the world lives in you. Much like this lantern that we have had this entire semester here, you are a vessel, and the light of the world is in you. I could take that lantern, that candle, right out of that lantern, and it would just be a frame, be a decorative, nice, pretty frame, put it on a coffee table, but without a candle in it, it's just a frame. If Jesus is in you, you are the light of the world. Daniel chapter 12, verse 3 says this: "Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever." Philippians 2, 14 through 15 says, "Do everything without grumbling and arguing," which is just a great sermon, but that's not tonight's sermon. Do everything without grumbling and arguing. Gosh, that's good. "So that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like what? Like stars in the sky." You and I are meant to be like the stars in the sky, guiding people to righteousness. This year, I have seen our seniors become those shining stars in the darkness, leading juniors and sophomores and freshmen deeper into their faith. And while I could stand up here and tell you all of their stories, I want to give you a very simple story. See, everybody wants to do these extraordinary things of like standing up here at a pulpit and like telling everybody how terrible they are and all that. Like people have these amazing moments. In fact, last year I gave this sermon talking about Elijah, the most amazing prophet that ever lived, and Elisha, his protege, right? And the more that I've thought about that sermon, the more I've thought, oh my gosh, give me a freaking break. Elijah's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of guy. We've got a bunch of people that are more like Boaz and Deborah and Ehud and Ahimelech. And you're like, who is Ahimelech? Like, we've got a bunch of people here that are the ones that are doing simple, everyday things but making a massive difference for God. Elijah's only come around once every now and then. But without all the stars in the sky, the bright stars aren't going to shine as bright, I believe. We have this one story that has stuck with me all year long. And as I was thinking about one thing about what it means to be here at Wesley, this one stuck with me. It was during Week of Welcome. And I was sitting in my office, and I don't think anybody knew that I was sitting in my office because I seldom sit in my office. But I was working away and typing up some stuff, some conference reports. That's why I was working in my office. And people were getting ready for like the carnival that was happening on Friday, and there was a lot of milling about, but I overheard a conversation. I'm going to put him on the spot tonight. He has no idea that I probably even heard this conversation, but I have to share it because it was so meaningful to me. I was sitting there working on this stuff, questioning my life because I hate paperwork. And I heard Dan Gregory outside in the hall. And Dan, if you know, has really made our video ministry here. All of our sermons that are online on YouTube and all that stuff, he has done that. And I was listening to him, and he was talking to Ben Smith. And this is what he said. He said, Ben, you are so good at editing and like putting videos together. You're way better at that than I am. And I was just wondering if maybe you would like to kind of help me do some stuff here. That conversation, as I had to shut my door, and I was like, Dan Gregory is making me cry in my office. And like, I hate that because I was like, he got what it means to be a part of Wesley and to create a legacy. It wasn't him saying, behold, look at me, I've got a video camera, look at me, everybody. It was him in a hallway saying, come and help me with this. Come and help this place shine for Jesus. And that kind of mentality is what it means to be a part of the family of faith. That's what it means to have a legacy. That's what it means to have a lineage that follows you. Not that you did something over the top and extraordinary and the walls of water were shown and the people went through to freedom. It's simple things that bring people in to inclusion, not only into the kingdom of God, but into the service of God. That day, he was able to share the purpose that we're all here for with someone else. And I could tell stories about how each of you in some way has done this. My question to you tonight is, what is your legacy? When you leave this place, have you done anything of leaving your mark? Have you even thought about that? Some of you might say, I really have not. You may be a freshman saying, you know what, I've just been receiving a lot from Wesley. Like I've been getting a lot. Like I come up to the table every week and I've got my knife and my fork and I am ready to feast. And that is so good. I'm so glad that you were full. But God pours into us that we may pour out into the world. You seniors, you are about to go into that world. And for 4 years or less, you have been poured into for this moment, so that when you go into a world of darkness, you will shine like stars. We don't look at graduation as a goodbye or an end to your life in Jesus, but we see it as the start of your mission for the rest of your life. You graduate with a major and a meaning that is your mission. But again, it doesn't have to be extravagant. My question to all of us tonight is, how then shall we live? Hebrews 12, 1 through 3 says it pretty clearly. It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let's throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles." Some of us are so concerned with sin and so like preoccupied with our temptations and our sin that we are forgetting about the meaning and the mission that God has put us on. And the writer of Hebrews says, "Let us then run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." And all of this starts out with, "Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses." The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of Moses, the God of David and Solomon and all the kings, Jesus, Peter, Paul, to the early church leaders like Irenaeus and Augustine, to Martin Luther, to John Wesley, all the way down, you and to me. You and I are part of an extraordinary legacy and lineage. And that's our cloud of witnesses. So what are we doing? What are we doing to make a difference? As you know, I teach a number of classes this semester, and at the end of 2 of my classes, I make them do some presentations about things that they've learned their freshman year. And yesterday, as a matter of fact, a student shared a presentation that just deeply kind of moved me. And it's weird because it's like an academic thing and I'm supposed to be grading it. And I'm like, wow, that is like wildly insightful. And in it, he showed a video that I want to share with you because I think that it has to do with the ripple effect of your legacy and lineage. Let's watch.